Check Podcasts.
Hey everyone, and welcome to Political Capital, your source for all the latest in BC politics. I'm your host, Rob Shaw, coming to you from the Czech News World headquarters in Victoria. It is spring break out there everywhere, including in BC politics, where Premier David Eby's government took a bit of a pause from the blistering pace of announcements, and we all got to take a breath, except our pod squad, who is still working hard to break down and analyze everything in the world of politics. Jeff, Jillian, and Allie are here. Thank you, as always, for being here to break this down. T-minus 1 week until BC's Spendapalooza comes to a halt. Billions and billions of dollars in provincial surplus money has been spent, has to be spent by the end of March. That's next Friday, when we're recording this, the end of the fiscal year, or else it rolls automatically onto debt. By my calculations, BC spent around $4 billion, more than that, since Eby became premier. One-time money, mostly a post-pandemic tax adjustment, once in a generation, as it's called. And I'd say, using napkin math, there's somewhere in the realm of a couple $2 to $3 billion left for the premier to spend by next week. So, should he spend it all? If so, is there anything left to spend it on? And can anyone spend that amount of money quickly? Jeff, why don't we start with you?
So I think the question for government is, you got surplus left over. Do you spend it now, or do you wait for a rainy day? And what I expect government is hearing from British Columbians is, don't know if you noticed, but it's pouring outside. Spend the money now. So if I'm government, I spend the money now. I think it's what British Columbians want. I think there's absolutely areas where additional investment is needed, whether that's in the core issues of housing, healthcare, affordability, public safety. There's all sorts of pressures people are facing in their day-to-day lives that our institutions are facing, healthcare and education. Spend the money. This is the time. This is the rainy day. Get that money out the door. Don't put it towards debt. People are hurting now. Make it happen.
Okay. All right. Allie, what do you think?
I absolutely agree with Jeff. This is the time to spend it. And normally I would say, as a fiscal conservative, let's just pay down the debt. But right now is just not the time to do that. This is where, during campaigns, politicians, political parties claim to be innovative and that they have bold leadership and they're going to do things differently. Well, this is the time to bring out that innovation and to bring out those wonderful ideas to spend that money. I mean, I'm sure there are a ton of stakeholders all across the province knocking on their door of, give me the resources, please, we need it. And so this is really going to be a test to the premier and to his cabinet of what they can do in such a short period of time. I mean, not all the blame is on David Eby too. He's only been a premier for a short period of time, but it's not like this was completely unexpected either. So the deadline is the deadline. It's the same as every year. Let's see what they do.
Okay, we all agree. Let's end the show.
Wait, Jillian, do you agree, or should we put it on debt?
This is going to surprise everyone, but I actually don't know if we should spend it all.
Okay.
The government, I know, this is what happens when we have too much time to think. We all change our political leaders. I would say more of a qualified they should spend it. I think if the government, they've already spent a lot of the money as you've discussed, you've been talking about that for weeks. If they can find, projects or areas to send the funds that have good proven return on investment, I think they should absolutely, get the dollars out the door for the reasons that Allie and Jeff said. One good one, for example, is the Island Economic Trust. Green MLAs have been raising in the House, and the minister said that they, may have more to say about that in future days. So I think we might get a couple last minute announcements about cash infusions to funds like that one, which has a proven track record of returning more money to communities by enabling them to invest in economic diversification. And this is a time where we really need that. We're in a time of economic transition, and a lot of communities are looking for sort of, more diverse ways to generate revenue for their communities. And I think that those are really worthy sources of the surplus. On the other hand, our debt to GDP ratio has been climbing. BC's in a better fiscal condition than most of the other provinces. But at the same time, we're going to have lots of needs to spend in future years as we continue this economic transition, continue to electrify the economy, as we try to meet our climate goals. And I don't think it's a bad idea to have a little bit of extra fiscal room for future years as the government, continues to deal with unexpected challenges. So, if it is $2 or $3 billion, there might be a way that they, put some into the deficit and into the government debt and spend some on places where it's really going to get a good return.
Mm-hmm. I do think probably we'll see at least a few $100 million go onto the debt just kind of automatically. You hear it, and it's odd to hear this, but you hear it from the EB government how hard it is to spend this money so quickly because there's all these accounting rules and things they need to do. It's why they tend to push it out to different groups, $1 billion for municipalities or whatever, to different kind of nonprofits and other community groups. Take the money, figure out what to do with it, because we don't have time to design the program or the execution, or we can't do repeat funding. This is one-time money. You take it. And on paper anyways, like, it's kind of a politician's dream, isn't it? A huge pot of money and a license to blow it out the door on all these problems like healthcare and housing and crime and climate change. So I guess I'm wondering... But Jeff, just like, okay, we'll start with you, but how has it landed, do you think, after these 4 months? Everything that's been spent so far, how has it landed in the public and in politically?
See, I think it's landed well because the public appetite is that they want to see the money invested. I think it's landed well in the stakeholder universe because if you look at where the money is going, whether it's to local government for the $1 billion for growing communities, or whether it's to nonprofit housing providers for the rental protection fund, and there's all sorts of other, the BC Cancer Foundation. These are long-standing partners of government who have put in front of government solid business cases over time for these kinds of investments. So I think folks are right to be wary of governments who decide to blow money away at the end of the year just because they have the funds. But that's not where the money is being invested. It's being invested in partnerships, longstanding partnerships with really solid business cases where people want to see impact. So I think it's landing well. And I would expect that for announcements that come with the rest of the money, that it would be the same kind of investment. So the risk of, someone just came to my office the other day and they have a monorail that they want for us to fund. I'm not sure that that's not where the government is looking to make the investments. Though monorails, maybe they could use one up Burnaby Mountain. I don't know.
Hey, we could use one in Victoria. Nice big monorail to get us out to the ferry terminal. But anyways. Yeah. Jillian, 911 technology, festivals and fairs, food stability, TransLink, ferries, municipalities, rental protections. There's a big, long list here of things that have got money. Has it landed, do you think, in the public consciousness of help and assistance and aid in all these areas?
I do think that it's given the kind of broad sense that EB is doing a lot of things and that he's, being attentive and that he's acting quickly. So I think, it's been a huge gift to him that he's had so much, ability to spread the funds around in that way. I do think that, and I think we talked about this last week, that it does carry some risk, right? Like when you can't take the time to put as many parameters around the funding as you normally would if you're doing a normal budgetary planning cycle, it just raises the risk that one of these big ticket items or even a medium ticket item that kind of sounds like a lot on paper, even though it's a small proportion of the budget, could kind of end up being used as an example of waste or government negligence in the future by the opposition. So I do think that there's a balance that they need to strike when they're throwing so much money out the door at so many different sources, to really make sure that they're putting in some safeguards, like Jeff discussed, giving it to places where there is already a good business case, or it's an existing program where there's administrative parameters around how that money gets spent. Because this is so often, the $16 glass of orange juice or the whatever. And I think we got $6,000 hotel room scandal at the federal level right now. Like, these are the kinds of things that can really hit government credibility, even if they're just small things that are a drop in the bucket in the grand scheme of things. So I think they do need to be mindful of that and not just spend it for the risk of spending it. It needs to go somewhere where they're going to be able to point to efficacy.
It's a great point, because one of the requirements is for the province has to get the money off the books and out of its control by the end of the fiscal year in order for it to be, using accounting principles and budgetarily gone. And so it can't claw any of it back. It can't take any money back, and it hasn't put really any audit provisions or kind of conditions on this money. It's just gone. It's out there, and it's an interesting discussion that if some of the examples blow up on government, they might become opposition fodder for waste. Allie, what do you think? How do you think it's landed, all of the various things that have been funded with this surplus?
Well, he certainly the premier certainly came out the gate just spending. Now, the criticism was, though, that as he was spending to what we've been talking about here, that he was spending it too quickly and therefore not really thinking about the long-term effects of things. And so I want to live in a world where if they are planning on spending it before the end of next week, that they are doing it in a way that is as mindful of their overall strategic goals, right? I mean, the NDP, just like any other political party, have these missions and areas in which they want to focus. But the argument here being that if they aren't spending it because of the potential political backlash of not thinking it through, then that's that leadership component that I keep coming back to, of you can't claim innovative, bold leadership if you're not willing to take a couple of risks sometimes too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're right. I mean, there is a lot of boldness that the EB government can claim here in the way that it is spending the money and is taking some risks and is creating kind of new ways to spend provincial money. To build off of the argument we're talking about, I'll just note the Angus Reid Institute out with a survey this week saying half of Canadians feel worse off financially now than they did this time last year. And we got new inflation numbers this week. Canada's inflation rate cooling slightly, which is good news in terms of the Bank of Canada pausing the rising interest rates. But BC's inflation rate stuck higher than the national average, and it didn't move at all. And so let's just go around and talk about what will be an opposition narrative to the idea that affordability remains an increasing problem in BC. Is it a good opposition narrative, I guess, to point to these kind of real world results, the Angus Reid survey, and then say the spending isn't working? Does that work for the opposition parties? Or, how do we interpret what looks to be kind of the people's wallets still being strained?
It's the gift to the opposition, though. This is the easiest thing that they could possibly attack government on. When things aren't working, it's government's fault, right? But who ends up losing here? So essentially, we've told young people that home ownership is completely out of reach. And now what we're also telling them is that through these polls and just through everything that's going on with inflation and the federal budget potentially coming, well, the federal budget is coming out next week, that also financial prosperity isn't an option either. And so these are very real world examples of what's happening in this country that are affecting a lot of people. It's the easiest thing any political party can say, though, this is your fault. Ultimately, though, what the government leaders, economists, all the rest of it, where we need to shift to in solutions, it's not so much just, like generalized things like we're going to invest in clean tech or we're going to invest in community vitality. What we want to see, I think, are actual numbers of here are the number of jobs that are coming. Here are this is how we're going to make housing affordability a little bit more within reach. And so that's kind of the political narrative that I think comes from this.
Mm-hmm. I wonder if we would have seen any different reaction if some of the surplus had been spent on, $2,000 EB dollars or something like that. Everyone gets cash that's tangible versus more what you were saying, Allie, of kind of like, well, we're investing in larger areas that you may never see agri-food stability or whatnot. I don't know. Jillian, what do you think of the opposition counterpoint here to point at the real world budget pressures on your wallet and say, none of this was really worth it?
Yeah, I think it's a really really the defining biggest political question of our time, and I don't know if anyone has a really great answer to it. I think that affordability is a widespread problem across the Western world because of inflation. And I think that voters, although it's their top issue, do have a sense that this is really being pushed by bigger forces. And then I think on top of that, I think voters and older voters tend to vote more. I think they remember that the housing crisis really began to spiral out of control under the Liberals. And while I do think that it's a potent narrative for both opposition parties to say 6 years, 7 years, 8 years later after the NDP took power, what's really changed. At the end of the day, voters are going to be looking for who's going to be offering me the best plan going forward. And I think the government has a few things that it can point to. It definitely has gotten a lot of help from the feds, especially on childcare. That's a huge. I hear people talk, non-political folk, talking about how big of a difference that's made on their monthly bills every month. So, I mean, the government has done a few rebates through ICBC and Hydro and those kinds of things. I think they're wise to not just be giving out money, because I think it doesn't have a big impact over time. And economists will tell you it adds to inflation. So, well, I don't know if voters think the government is doing enough. I'm also not sure if the opposition is going to be able to materially benefit in terms of an electoral outcome without some new ideas, and we haven't really seen that anywhere yet.
Yeah, it's a great point, because to extrapolate from that, what the opposition parties would be relying on is a voter sentiment to punish the government for inaction. And it's hard to sort of get, I don't hear anyone wanting to punish the NDP. I mean, maybe they are not hitting quite the mark on how they're spending the money, but at least they're trying. At least they're out there talking about those issues. So I think it's a great point, Jillian, that it'll be a choice of ideas and future paths, not so much like punishing the Liberals in 2017. Jeff, what do you think of all the opposition maneuvering on this?
Yeah, I think that it falls flat when opposition tries to personally blame politicians for situations that everyone understands are materially completely beyond the control of that politician, whether it's crime or, in this case, affordability. Affordability is a challenge, as Jillian notes, across the Western world. And imagine where we would be if the government hadn't taken a number of the steps that Jillian flagged, whether it's, didn't mention the tolls on bridges, which I like to raise all the time, MSP premiums, family benefit, ferry fares, keeping them affordable, transit fares, keeping them affordable, ICBC rate freeze. We could talk about accounting if you want, but I think everyone would fall asleep. Hydro rebate, affordability credits going up, childcare benefits are huge, and I think the most important and one of the best things government has done. So I think the question voters will be asking themselves, it's even more than what Allie's saying. You're right that it's about what are the specifics and how does it affect me? But I think it's about how does it affect me in my day-to-day life? And they want to know that there's a premier who understands the issue, that is working to make change on the issue. And I think that Kevin Falcon would probably be more likely to score some points on this if he didn't give off those serious Gordon Gekko vibes. There's still time for Eleanor Sturko. Make her the leader. I think she'd be way better positioned to make some headway on this. I think she's just she's a stronger presence and a better face for BC United than the fellow they've got there now.
She did also. She stopped someone with a knife outside of a restaurant this week.
That was
That's
amazing.
Incredible. It's the first time we've ever seen an MLA do that.
Yeah. And you hear what she said? She was like, "No, it wasn't. I wasn't really being a hero. They dropped the knife, so I stepped on it. So I really didn't do that much. No, that was really cool. Full marks to her on that. That was really good."
Yeah. Oh, it is. I mean, the type of. I guess you got to give Kevin Falcon credit for recruiting such a great candidate, Jeff, as well. But anyways, we'll park that.
Just step aside, move out of the way, let her finish the transition to leadership.
That's always a good idea to take political advice from other parties. That's always a good way to do it. But okay, well that was a great discussion. Thank you everyone for that. We'll be back next week with all the latest here on Political Capital.